Wanna play hide and clap?
The fame of Ed and Lorraine Warren spread worldwide, thanks in part to the popular Conjuring movies, which are based on their real-life cases. But beyond the movies are real stories, far more terrifying than anything Hollywood could ever create. For decades, Ed and Lorraine investigated some of the most disturbing paranormal cases ever recorded. Ed Warren was a self-taught demonologist, one of the few recognized by the Catholic Church. Lorraine Warren was a clairvoyant with the ability to sense and communicate with spirits. Together, they founded the New England Society for Psychic Research in 1952, making them among the first to document paranormal activity professionally. Over the years, they claimed to have handled over 10,000 cases, haunted houses, demonic possessions, and other encounters no one else dared to face. Some saw them as saviors, others as frauds, but one thing is certain: those who called on them believed they were facing something evil. In this video, we will take you through 5 of their most chilling investigations. And trust me, the last case will leave you speechless. If you want to hear more stories like these, make sure to subscribe. Now, let's get into it. Imagine moving into a new home, hoping for a fresh start, only to find out that your basement once held the dead. I personally don't know if Ed and Lorraine Warren were real psychics, because skeptics have raised strong criticisms against them, especially in the Netflix documentary, The Devil on Trial. But we'll explore that side of the story in upcoming videos. This is exactly what happened to Carmen and Al Snedeker in 1986, when they rented a house in Southington, Connecticut. On the surface, it looked like a quiet place to rebuild their lives, but the house had secrets, and soon those secrets made themselves known. While exploring the basement, the Snedekers made a chilling discovery: rusty mortuary tools left behind, hidden in the shadows. That's when they learned the truth. Their new home was once a funeral parlor. At first, the strange occurrences seemed harmless: cold spots, unexplained noises. But things escalated quickly. The smell of rotting flesh filled the air without explanation. Water from the taps would sometimes run blood red. And then, the shadows came. Their eldest son, who was undergoing cancer treatment, began seeing terrifying visions. He described shadowy figures lurking in the house, watching, waiting. And what happened next was beyond disturbing. Carmen and Al claimed that these entities became violent, even sexually assaulting them. With nowhere else to turn, the Snedekers reached out to Ed and Lorraine Warren. When the Warrens arrived, they immediately sensed something dark within the home. According to Lorraine, the basement held the strongest presence. She believed that the former morticians had performed unspeakable acts on the corpses, inviting something evil into the house. The Warrens conducted a series of investigations, documenting violent poltergeist activity. Ed claimed that the house was infested with a demonic presence, one that fed off the family's fear. They performed an exorcism to cleanse the house, and after weeks of terror, the activity finally stopped. But the trauma, that stayed with the Snedekers forever. Some believe the story was exaggerated, even fabricated. But for those who lived through it, the fear was real. And if you think this was unsettling, the next case will only get darker. Stay with us. There's much more to uncover. A quiet farmhouse, a loving family, and an unimaginable evil lurking in the shadows. In 1971, Roger and Carolyn Perron moved into a sprawling 200-acre farmhouse in Harrisville, Rhode Island, with their 5 young daughters. But they had no idea of the darkness that waited for them. The house held a grim past. Over the years, it had seen countless tragedies, murders, suicides, even a woman accused of witchcraft. Some say her spirit never left. At first, it was subtle. Doors creaked open on their own. Small objects vanished and reappeared. But soon the family began to realize they were not alone. The spirits seemed to choose their victims carefully. Carolyn, the mother, became the primary target. She reported waking up to the sensation of hands grabbing her feet and the smell of rotting flesh lingering in the air. One of the daughters claimed to see a ghostly woman with a twisted, angry face who would whisper, "Get out." Desperate and terrified, the Perrons reached out to Ed and Lorraine Warren. When the Warrens arrived, they immediately sensed an evil presence consuming the house. Lorraine believed that the spirit of Bathsheba Sherman, a suspected witch who once lived on the property, was responsible for the torment. According to legend, Bathsheba cursed the land before taking her own life. The Warrens decided to hold a seance to contact the spirit, but what happened next shook everyone to their core. During the seance, Carolyn became possessed. She spoke in a deep, inhuman voice. Her chair levitated and was thrown across the room. Roger Perron, fearing for his wife's safety, demanded the Warrens leave the house immediately. The Warrens believed they had uncovered something far darker than a typical haunting, a demonic force bound to the land itself. The Perrons remained in the house for nearly a decade before they could finally escape. But according to the family, the spirit of Bathsheba never truly left. Was the Perron family's torment real, or just another ghost story? The truth remains buried beneath the surface, waiting. And if you think this story is chilling, wait until you hear the next one, where a simple family home became a gateway for something unspeakable. A quiet house, an ordinary family, and a nightmare that would soon grip the world's attention. In 1977, the Hodgson family, single mother Peggy and her 4 children, lived a simple life in Enfield, England. But one night, everything changed. It started with small things, furniture creaking, strange tapping noises. At first, Peggy thought it was just the usual sounds of an old house settling at night. But then, her daughters began to scream. One evening, as Janet and Margaret lay in bed, a loud knock came from inside the walls. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't the pipes. It was something else. When Peggy rushed in, she watched in horror as a chest of drawers slid across the floor, on its own, blocking the bedroom door. Terrified, the family fled to the neighbors for help. But the strange activity only grew stronger. Even the police couldn't explain it. One officer swore she saw a chair lift off the ground and move several feet before settling back down. And this was just the beginning. Janet, the 11-year-old daughter, became the center of the haunting. Something had attached itself to her, and it wasn't letting go. She started to speak in a deep, raspy voice, one that wasn't her own. She claimed to be an old man named Bill Wilkins, who had died in the house years before. "This is my house," the voice growled. "I will never leave." But what disturbed investigators the most was what happened next. Eyewitnesses, including journalists and paranormal researchers, watched in disbelief as Janet was lifted off her bed and thrown across the room by an invisible force. The photos captured during these events show something unexplainable. Janet suspended in midair, as though some unseen power had yanked her upward. In 1978, Ed and Lorraine Warren traveled to Enfield to investigate the case. By the time they arrived, the activity had reached terrifying new levels. Objects flew across rooms, cold drafts swept through the house, and the mysterious voice inside Janet grew stronger, angrier. Lorraine believed that what haunted the Hodgsons was no mere ghost. She was convinced it was a demonic entity, one using Janet as a conduit to grow stronger. During one seance, Lorraine claimed to see a dark shadow looming behind Janet, feeding off her fear. And the more attention the case drew, the more powerful the entity seemed to become. For 18 months, the Hodgsons endured the unimaginable. Despite countless investigations and even an exorcism attempt, the haunting didn't stop. One day, just as mysteriously as it began, the activity slowed and finally ceased. But for Janet, the nightmare never truly ended. She would later admit that even decades after leaving that house, something still followed her. Some call the Enfield Poltergeist one of the most documented hauntings in history. Others believe it was nothing more than a hoax, a cry for attention. But for those who were there, the fear was real. And if you think this story was chilling, what's coming next will make you question everything you know about the world around you. Stay with us. There are still darker secrets to uncover. By now, you probably think this is the most terrifying case Ed and Lorraine Warren ever faced. But trust me, there's still more to come. And the horrors, they only get darker. You might know her as Annabelle, thanks to the Conjuring spin-offs like Annabelle, 2014, and Annabelle, Creation, 2017. But the real story, it's far more disturbing. It all began in the 1970s when a young nursing student named Donna received a Raggedy Ann doll as a gift from her mother. At first it seemed harmless, just another doll. But soon, things turned sinister. The doll began to move, appearing in different rooms when no one was watching. Sometimes it would sit cross-legged on the floor, as if it had been waiting. And then came the notes. Small pieces of parchment paper would appear around the apartment, each one scrawled with a chilling message: "Help me." But the worst was yet to come. One night, Donna's roommate's boyfriend, Lou, woke up paralyzed. As he lay there helpless, he watched the doll crawl up his chest, its cold hands wrapping around his neck, trying to strangle him. The next day, Lou felt a sudden pain in his chest. When he lifted his shirt, he found deep claw marks, as if something inhuman had attacked him. Desperate and terrified, Donna contacted a medium who claimed the doll was possessed by the spirit of a 7-year-old girl named Annabelle Higgins. According to the medium, Annabelle was lonely. She just wanted to stay with them. But Ed and Lorraine Warren knew the truth. This wasn't a child spirit. It was something far worse, a demonic entity using the doll as a conduit to infest the apartment and ultimately possess a human soul. The Warrens immediately took the doll to their occult museum, locking it inside a special glass case, blessed by a priest. And that's where Annabelle still sits today. But even locked away, her evil remains. One visitor mocked the doll, laughing as he banged on her case. Hours later, he lost control of his motorcycle and died in a brutal crash. The last thing his girlfriend remembered him saying, "I shouldn't have mocked Annabelle." To this day, Annabelle remains trapped inside her blessed glass case with a sign that reads, "Positively, do not open." And if you think this case was terrifying, what comes next is even darker. By now, you might think nothing could be more terrifying than Annabelle. But what if I told you there's a case where the entity didn't just haunt the house, it attacked the family? This is the chilling story of the Smurl haunting, one of the most violent cases Ed and Lorraine Warren ever investigated. It began in 1974 when Jack and Janet Smurl moved into a quiet home on Chase Street in West Pittston, Pennsylvania. It was supposed to be their dream home, but instead, it became their nightmare. At first, the signs were subtle. Foul odors filled the house, lights flickered, and chilling cold spots appeared without explanation. But soon the entity grew bolder. The Smurls reported heavy banging coming from the walls, sometimes so loud it shook the entire house. Their German Shepherd was lifted off the ground and thrown against a wall by an unseen force. And then, it got personal. Both Jack and Janet claimed they were physically assaulted by the entity. Jack described feeling paralyzed in bed while an invisible force climbed on top of him, scratching and biting him. One night, Janet was pulled from her bed by her hair, while a dark, shadowy figure hovered over her, whispering in a voice that was not human. Terrified, the Smurls turned to Ed and Lorraine Warren for help. After a thorough investigation, the Warrens concluded that the house was infested by a powerful demonic presence. According to Ed, he witnessed a dark mass materialize in the home, an entity that seemed to feed off the family's fear and suffering, and the demon wanted one thing: to destroy them. Despite multiple blessings and exorcisms, the attacks continued. Jack even reported that the demon followed him to work, a chilling reminder that it wasn't just the house that was cursed, it was them. The Warrens warned the Smurls that this wasn't an ordinary haunting, it was a malevolent force, one that wouldn't leave quietly. Years later, the Smurl haunting became the basis for the TV movie, The Haunted. But no screen adaptation could capture the real horror the Smurls endured. And if you think this case was terrifying, what's next will haunt you forever. You've just witnessed some of the most terrifying cases ever investigated by Ed and Lorraine Warren. But here's the thing. What if I told you there are even darker secrets they uncovered? Cases so disturbing, they've been kept from the public eye for decades. What if Annabelle wasn't the most dangerous object locked away in their occult museum? And what if some spirits never truly rest? We've only opened the door, but there's still so much more waiting on the other side. Are you brave enough to step through it? The truth is far from over. Subscribe because the darkest stories are still to come.